Thank you for the warm welcome, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here. Last year when we honored the University Scholar, we were not in this building, so I can say that it's just a joy to use, to experience this facility for another one of UIS's great events. And it's just lovely. It's a wonderful place and space, and it's a happy occasion to be here to celebrate with you. Many of you may know the University Scholars Award is actually appointed by and funded by the system. So we have university scholars at all three of our universities, and I travel to all three to help award our awardees. And I can tell you it is just a uniformly exciting and distinguished experience because this is the best of the best. And the competition is very fierce, and anybody who's nominated sometimes has to be nominated more than one time in order to be honored, because there's so many wonderful faculty that are doing such great things. The thing about the University Scholars Award that I appreciate the most is that it really says you have to be good at all things. You can't just be a great researcher, you can't just be a great teacher, and you can't just do great service. We're going to acknowledge people who do all three, the kind of trifecta of excellence in the academic world. And that's hard to do, as all of you know, and as I can remember when I was living a life as a faculty member more fully than I am now. So it's really an honor to recognize the faculty that we do with this award. This award has been around since 1985, and since that time we have awarded 621 university scholars across the three universities. And I know my home department is at Urbana, and when I look at the names on the list and I look at the names on your list, it's really a dashboard of excellence. You look at all the names of people that have been recognized over time and you kind of say, wow, and then now, Richard, you can say, wow, I'm a part of that. So it's a really impressive, I think, acknowledgement or award, and I want to just say that I'm delighted to welcome you, Richard, to this group. So let me tell you a little bit about Richard, because you're really more interested in hearing from him than from me, but his record is incredibly impressive, and by looking at his CV, I was struck by how productive he's been over his time. He's one of the most prominent political scientists in the world, frankly. He's an expert in a lot of things: political philosophy, contemporary social theory, Marxism, capitalism, postmodern philosophy, critical theory, social movements, and the public sphere. And I'm a social scientist myself, and I only understand a few of those things, but it's an impressive list of theories and perspectives to be well versed in. He's got a broad and deep understanding of current affairs, especially at the global level, which we all know increasingly you can't think locally, you can't think nationally, you have to think globally if you're going to be a leader in this world and think about the impact of so many issues on our society. And he's got a gift for gently but firmly highlighting injustices and inequities that often linger subtly beneath the surface. And I like that idea that someone is gently highlighting injustices. We don't have a lot of gentle activities in the country these days. It doesn't feel to me like, and so when I see that someone's able to do the kind of prodding and reminding to all of us about the things we need to think about with a deft and gentle hand, I think that's a particular skill. I've already mentioned, or I think Dennis has mentioned, but certainly your program mentions, he's an author of 4 well-received books published by prestigious presses. They're listed in your program, and he's also authored journal articles and book chapters as well. But the great thing is he's a wonderful teacher, and you'll probably see that when he comes up and speaks today, and I've just gotten a sense of it from talking to him at the table. He's a well-liked and very accomplished lecturer, and his classes are very popular. And when you think about it, how do you teach political theory in the first year to undergraduates and actually make them like that is really quite an astounding accomplishment. So all the more credit to you, Richard, for taking on some really tough topics and helping students think through really important concepts as they understand the world. He's also involved in a lot of ways with students outside the classroom, and my favorite fun fact in the end is that he's an acclaimed free jazz percussionist and drummer in his spare time, on top of being a father of 2 kids. So he's sort of the all-around incredible guy, and I'd like you to please join me in congratulating Richard Gilman-Opalsky as the next University Scholar. So I want you to all see that he's going to be the owner of a very heavy plaque that I know will be in his office if you want to go visit him. So, Richard, congratulations.
Thank you very much for all those introductions. Thank you very much for being here. It's nice to see friends here today. And I want to thank faculty colleagues who nominated me for this award, and those who reviewed my scholarship and found it deserving of this distinction. It means a lot to me. And I want to thank also my partner, Robin Gilman-Opalsky, sitting here at the table, who's encouraged and supported me at every point on the pathway to this juncture. And what Provost Papini says is true. I was, for some current research, reading Mary Gabriel's book on called Love and Capital. It's about the relationship of Jenny and Karl Marx. And somewhere halfway through that book, I thought Jenny Marx should have been listed as a co-author on everything that, that Marx published. So I agree, and thank you, Robin, for being here, too. I wanted this afternoon to make some remarks under the loose heading, 2 marginal notes on recognition. This very event is premised on the importance of recognition. And for me, this award really couldn't have come at a better time. I've been researching and writing books and articles for 12 years here at UIS and have not been motivated by awards, but rather by a commitment to make use of the very few and particular, and you might say also peculiar talents that I have. To make use of them has been my commitment. And it was really here at UIS, I was quite surprised when I found this out, that I discovered how much I loved to do scholarship, that I learned, I realized, and I continue to feel that writing is my most effective mode of participation in the discussions and also in the movements that I care about most. And, you know, I've been mostly gratified. I've been mostly gratified for this time just by doing the work, because I do love to do the work, and I love to learn things that I didn't know before. But a somewhat embarrassing confession. One always has to think a little bit about whether or not to make embarrassing confessions in a room full of people, but a somewhat embarrassing confession. Slowly, after seeing growing interest in my research outside of UIS and also outside of the US, and not only among scholars, but also from activists, and I think for me that actually has always meant more. And peer review is sort of the thing that's supposed to matter the most, but when a young student in Mexico writes me and says, I want to translate your essay because I think it would be useful for movements in Latin America, that's the thing that matters more than anything else to me. And a high school student is, to me, the most important review. But I started to feel a little bit of frustration when I saw some of that interest. I was surprised by it at first, and then after a while I started to feel some frustration with what seemed to me like a kind of institutional indifference to the work that I was doing. And I really started to worry, that maybe I was becoming petty and self-interested because I never really cared. And then after a while I started to, and I thought, nobody cares at this institution about what I'm doing. And it really made me worry about myself and maybe if my attitude was changing in a negative way. And I also have to tell you that this award goes a long way to overturning that frustration in me personally. I mean, this award really turns that feeling around, and I'm really grateful for that. But there are, of course, others at UIS, and some of them have been nominated. And probably, of course, there are many more who have not been nominated. We may not know who they are, who probably feel deprived of appropriate recognition and appreciation. And I really think we have to try to think about that. It's not easy to do, but I think we have to try to think about that. And there's only one of these awards on our campus, but many professors at UIS whose scholarship is deserving of institutional recognition and appreciation. And I really think that which is not recognized has to be an important consideration of every recognition. So whenever people gather in any way for any kind of recognition, we have to think about what isn't being recognized or what hasn't been or what ought to be recognized at every recognition. And we must always ask, what is not being recognized in the ways that dignity might demand? So one message, one marginal note on recognition, I think is that we should try to create more awards at the college level. They don't all have to be the same, and more forms of recognizing the work that our colleagues do on this campus. And we have to find ways to do it. I have some ideas. More of the scholarship of our faculty colleagues. But I want to highlight also another message. You can call this the second marginal note on recognition. And this is a message that I hope that this award might convey to my colleagues at UIS. And I would like for this recognition to be taken as an encouragement to go into the margins and to work in the margins. The word margin dates to the middle of the 14th century and originally meant edge of a sea or a lake. In Springfield, obviously, we only speak of a lake. We must only speak of a lake. From the Latin marginem, margin indicates edge, brink, boundary, border. And I have always worked in the margins of political science, even at the boundary or the brink of the university. And someone could say that it's my research interests, some of which you've heard others speak about, you can read about in the program, that have kept me in the margins. But actually, I often think that being in the margins has more to do with what one finds uninteresting. Just for example, I'm a political scientist, and I am generally uninterested in what professional politicians say or do. It's insufferably boring, in my opinion. And so much of conventional politics is abysmally unimaginative, wholly encompassed by the predictable ideological scripts of our two parties, both of which are chronic and reliable disappointments. And I would even go so far as to say something stunning in the U.S. today. I even find the tweets of Donald Trump to be boring. And I know that is perhaps going too far. But I think we have to be careful about what we recognize and attend to, because we enlarge the power of things through our attention. And that's something I want to talk about also in a moment, that the enlargement of the power of even the things we hate, by giving them our scarce and precious resource, our attention. In all of my work, I've been drawn instead to the lives, the struggles of people without power, without privilege, not only to the politics of everyday people, but to the politics of everyday life. And what I have found, and what variously I argue in all of my work, is that the most creative advances in political thought come not from professional thinkers, not from politicians, not from people who win awards at universities for scholarship, but from global uprisings, from the Mexican Zapatistas in the early 1990s, to global uprisings in Greece and Spain, the Arab Spring, Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter in the US. And I am interested in what I call in my work philosophy from below. Philosophy from below, which is a form of critical thinking that comes from underneath official stations of power. It's a kind of enacted thinking. It's a kind of activity that carries into the world a certain way of looking at things, carries into the world for us to see different understandings. And it throws the justice and reality of the existing world into question when it happens. Philosophy from below. I gave you some examples. And throwing the world into question has always been the purview of philosophy, going all the way back to Socrates, throwing the world into question, throwing its justice and reality into question. So I work in the margins because I think it's the best place to see what has been left out. Also, what has been left out of the discourses that dominate our disciplines. The subtitle of Bell Hooks's book, Feminist Theory, is From Margin to Center, which in 1984 meant that the perspective of impoverished black women had been left out of feminist theory, and Hooks was going to try to correct that by putting it in to feminist theory. And a similar principle, I think, governs my own work, namely to consider the absences. To consider the absences. To consider the absences of recognition in a recognition. To consider deficits in recognition at recognition events, but also to try to see what else has been invisibilized by absent recognition. What don't we see, but should we see? So now, of course, a professor takes some risks in choosing to work in the margins. And that's a strange thing to consider. You think about why should it be risky for a professor to work in the margins, to teach marginal things, to research and write about marginal things. Why is it risky to work in the margins in a discipline at a university? It's a very strange thing that that should be dangerous. It should be safe. And that's one of the many reasons, obviously, I think, why academic freedom has to be defended at every university. And more importantly, why academic freedom needs to be used. In making use of a freedom, we demonstrate its importance. In making use of a freedom, we demonstrate its importance. And when people do not make use of their freedoms, there is always somebody waiting in the wings to wonder why they should be there any longer. And I suspect that too many professors, so this is my audience now, and I make any accusations because I don't know, but I do suspect that too many professors do not make use of this peculiar freedom and should ask themselves, how can I make use of my academic freedom? I hope that in some small way, this recognition as University Scholar will encourage those who are here today, and even those who may learn of the award later on and elsewhere, to pursue especially those interests of theirs that go against the grain, to pursue the dangerous questions, the dangerous hypotheses. And I think this is not only true in the social sciences and humanities, for even in the natural sciences, the major discoveries often come from the margins of the disciplines. I was just reading an article in last month's The Atlantic about Gerda Keller, the Princeton geologist, who has struggled against her whole discipline to make claims about the fifth extinction that are now finally starting to be recognized as serious and possibly right. I mean, she received death threats. She was attacked in all ways just for risking to rethink what was accepted as established fact within her discipline. Now, I don't know if this is good job advice that I'm giving you. It may not be. But what I think I want to stress right now at this moment is that it hasn't kept me from this podium. And also, I think it's a kind of moral and also political counsel. And it is something to think about when you construct a syllabus and when you come to think about your next project and research. We live in a world where our attention is targeted and colonized by so many things, clamoring to be looked at. And we simply can't attend to everything. We cannot. It's not possible to attend to everything that wants our attention. And so we have to consider what to do with our attention, which is, again, a limited and precious resource. The great French radical feminist militant Simone Weil, she once wrote, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. But giving attention to that which has been neglected and left out is not charity." And I'm opposed to this idea. One's own understanding always improves from real attention to the other, to the left out. And we must also remember that one can see the most hopeful horizons when standing with what has been, when standing with those who have been left out, when standing in the margins, at the edge of a sea, at the edge of a lake. Thank you.